All right, so I just want to give you a peek of my client sign-offs, especially as it relates to web design projects. So there's a couple of moments in time that I like to capture with each client to make sure that we're on the same page because, gosh, it's like really hard to get certain amount of ways through the project, and then only we discover later that the client wants to redo something that I thought was already approved. Also, when you get approvals for projects, those moments in time are often tied to billing milestones. So being really clear about, hey, this thing just got done and now I get to invoice you or ring your credit card for the next stage is really key. So I'm going to show you 3 different sign-offs. And what I'm not showing in this video is the contract that actually leads to this. I have another training on that if you want to check it out, but this is all about once the project starts. So the very first thing I like to get the client to sign off on is what I call the point of contact form. Okay, so what is the purpose of the point of contact? Is that I want to identify on the client side who is the person who is responsible for making the decisions and even being able to sign off on these different milestone documents. Okay, I'll tell you a quick story. One of my early web design projects, the client, what would happen is I would send the design to the client, and then what they would do is they would take that and they sent it to like 7 or 8 or 10 different people, like no joke. And then I would get emails back, and one email would say, it's too blue, or, we need to change this building to that building, and this picture to that picture. And we need, I like the blue, I hate the blue, I want the text bigger, I want it smaller, I want left, right. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, this is exactly what came back. And the issue is like, by making any change on that feedback, I risked alienating or upsetting somebody else. The guy who wanted it not to be blue, I changed it to red, and then the guy who liked it blue was like, what the heck did you do? And so what I realized in that moment is that I need a point of contact. I need someone who is the decision maker, and we record that here. So what we say here is the client point of contact. The responsibilities of the main point of contact include attending all meetings, being the recipient of all communication from our project coordinator, phone calls and emails, being the sole provider of approved content, and being the sole approver of all sign-offs. Okay, that's what we're asking them to do. Okay, cool. So then what happened is we've had other projects where we had somebody who was the main point of contact and then somebody else stepped in. So that's why we created the change of point of contact. So from time to time it becomes necessary to change the person who previously designated as the single point of contact. In that event, the initial point of contact is no longer with the company or is unable to perform the duties assigned. The new point of contact agrees that all previous approvals and sign-offs are still valid. So here's now the new point of contact, right? Very simple. This sets up what I'm going to share with you next. Let's jump into the design sign-off here. Let's see. Here we go. Almost there. This is our website design process binder. Okay, so we've got our design approval form. So this is the moment in time where we say, hey, the design is locked in. Anything that we want to change, don't sign this if there are more changes to be made. The analogy I give to clients a lot of times is something like, imagine you're building a house. It's a heck of a lot easier to move where your kitchen is before we start building it, right? So if we want the kitchen is on the west side of the house, and then you say, never mind, I want it on the east side. Well, it's a lot easier to do that in design and on paper than it is once we've started laying foundations and electrical and plumbing and walls and all that kind of stuff, right? So design approval kind of works the same way. So in this, we basically say, I, client name, with authorization of whatever the company name, have reviewed the design and layouts completed by the company pursuant to the website services agreement, and any amendment, the client hereby approves the design as completed to its complete satisfaction approval. Client agrees pursuant to the contract documents that any changes to the design that the client may request after the date of the execution of the approval, or for any work that is performed by the client by the client's request by the business that is outside the contract document, shall be billed to the client at the published hourly rate, and the client shall be responsible for payment of the same. So that's our attorney's way of saying you're approving the design, and if you want to change the design, we're going to bill you for it, and you're agreeing to pay for it. Cool. So there's that guy there. So that's the design sign-off. And then we have let's jump over to our final approval. This one is so critical. How many of you guys are launching websites without getting an approval at the end? I'll tell you a quick story about why that's important in a moment. Okay, so I, with the consent of the client, reviewed all the work by the company and pursuant to the website services agreements and any amendments. The client has tested the functionality, work performed, and pursuant to the contract documents, has found no issues, and hereby approves the work completed to its complete satisfaction. The approval. Client confirms that it will hold the company harmless for any and all damages client may suffer as a result of any of the work that has been done after this date. In the final approval form, client agrees pursuant to the contract that any changes to the work and client may request after the date of this execution of this approval, any work that's performed at the request of the client by us, the company, the contract shall be billed at the client's published hourly rate, and the client shall be responsible for paying that. So fancy way of saying that you're proving this, that everything works to your satisfaction, and anything that the client directs us to change after that is billable. Okay, so let me tell you a quick story about this final approval form. I've rarely had to enforce anything or like pull these documents out again. Although having this done consistently, it's one of those things where it just draws a line in the sand. And one of the best things you can be to your client is clear about what's going on. And some people avoid having these approvals signed because there's legal stuff in here. It sounds like really permanent, and it may feel uncomfortable or awkward to ask clients to sign this. But we do this all the time in all aspects of our business and in our lives, approving things and agreeing to terms. And I think that what this does is it's really fair to our clients to let them know there's a line in the sand, and that way we're on the same page about things. There's nothing more frustrating than having a client come back to you and expecting something for free when you thought it was approved, but you didn't ask them for an approval. So can we really get mad at a client for asking for that? Oh, they knew it. They knew that they shouldn't ask for that because we launched the website. Well, do they really know that? Being clear is kind, and having these documents will at least prevent those things from coming up, because at least you're on the same page. So that's why I haven't had to use these documents in any other formal way after they've been signed, because we've just had the conversation that this is what's happening, and then everyone's clear. Now, the one time that I had to actually pull this out, we had launched a website for a client, and it was at least 6 months later, I got a letter from an attorney of this client saying that I had misrepresented my services. I'd misrepresented what I was able to do, and that the website that they got, they didn't like it, and that they are having problems with it. And at first I was like, I felt terrible. I was like, oh my gosh. And now, being fair, these clients were not the easiest ones to work with, and I learned a lot in that project for sure. But then I remembered I had this document. I'm like, well, if they're saying it's not meeting their expectations, and that they and that I misrepresented something, then why would they have signed a form that said that it was acceptable to and that they tested things, and that everything that I said was going to be done within the contract was fulfilled? There was a misalignment there. So all I had to do is I sent them back this document and said, well, this is what you signed. So what you're saying here doesn't make any sense to me. There was an opportunity for us to talk about this. And, honestly, I'm human. I'm willing to work through any issues, especially if somebody's dissatisfied. But their immediate thing was trying to scare me into a refund. And, if somebody has an issue, come and tell me and we'll talk about it. But scaring me into a refund is not the right way to do it. So I was able to meet them with this, and I was so grateful to have this, because it just helped me realize that these guys were the exception. For the thousands of projects that I've worked on, having this in my back pocket was great. But really, this document has saved us so many other times, because it just set the expectation ahead of time, right? We didn't need this document later because there was a conversation about this thing moving forward. So hopefully that's helpful to you. Those 3 documents: point of contact, change of point of contact, the final approval form, the design approval form. Any place that you have a moment in time where you're asking for a client's approval, or them changing their mind later would become a big issue and cause more billing. This is a chance for them to get them to sign that, and you guys to have the conversation. There's been plenty of times where we've asked a client to sign this, and then they take it seriously. They'll go back and be like, well, let me just double check and make sure that everything is to my liking. And they maybe find some things that they need to change. And I'd much rather handle it then than weeks, months, years down the road. So hopefully you find that helpful, and you start implementing some of these things inside your agency.